All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. There'll be excellent on-site vehicle circulation and ingress and egress to the adjoining road system. No repairs, no auto repairs or auto maintenance will be conducted on the site. As I indicated, the subject site is adjacent to the 1,400-acre Hauppauge Industrial Park and nearby two large office complexes such as the Tritech office building, the Reckler office building, among others. The site fronts the Motor Parkway, which runs parallel to the Long Island Expressway, and is also near the entrance and exit ramps of the Long Island Expressway. There are no residential areas in proximity to the subject site. The petitioner's operation will have to compete with the approximately 2,700 to 3,000 square foot 7-Eleven convenience store on the south side of Motor Parkway previously referred to. Because of the foregoing reasons and more, the need to be able to service customers anticipated from the industrial buildings, office complexes, and traffic in the existing traffic stream, a larger size convenience store is being requested at this unique location. I respectfully submit there is no other location in the town of Smithtown that equates this location, and no precedent will be set if the site is approved as requested for the size convenience store set forth in the call of the meeting. Now, the convenience store will have a classic architectural appearance, and I have the elevations to my left, with a brick veneer, pilasters or pillars at the four corners of the building, an extended portico entrance with columns, coins on each pilaster. The convenience store will have a height of 17 feet 7 inches at the corner pillars and a height of 15 feet 5 inches to the parapet. The total floor area ratio of the convenience store will only be 7.5% of the site. Although the applicant has requested 1,900 square feet, the existing building to be demolished is 1,650 square feet, or only a difference of 250 square feet in terms of building size. The convenience store will contain office areas, storage, handicap bathrooms, counter space, payment area for the operator, coolers, self-service area for coffee, etc., in addition to the gondolas in the sales area. The canopy will have simple, clean lines in its design. The canopy will have all lighting recessed into the deck, and it will also contain the fire suppression system. The canopy, as we know, is a necessary structure as it protects the consumer at the self-service dispenser from the elements while they fill their vehicle with gasoline. Now, there's a variance request for the canopy, and there's a very practical reason for it. The accessory structure is merely for a cover for the elements. For self-service customers, it's not a solid wall type of building as contemplated by the ordinance for setback distances. And not only that, the cars, it's generally closer to the road because that's where the cars come in to get the gasoline. Now, the planning board recommended approval of the change of zone of the subject parcel from WSI to NB district. This is the planning board recommendation, stating that it would be consistent with the comprehensive plan that the proposed zoning would permit land use that is more compatible with the Hauppauge Industrial Park, and that the rezoning would not tend to set an undesirable precedent on any other site. That was the planning board recommendation. In its advisory report to the planning board, the planning staff stated, and I quote, "This location is appropriate to have a filling station and/or convenience store to serve the needs of the 30,000 workers in the industrial park, 230,000 daily motorists on the Long Island Expressway and Motor Parkway, and residents south of the expressway. This intersection is one of the main gateways to the park and is close to the nearest expressway exit. Some retail and filling station uses are located on the south side of Motor Parkway in the town of Islip, but no others in the town of Smithtown. NB appears to be a better district to serve the interests of the town. Although the proposed zone is different from the surrounding area, it is fair to say that the proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan because it advances the intent of the plan in that it helps support the industrial park. And, close quote, this was based upon the site plan that's being presented this evening to this board with a 1,900 square foot convenience store. The affirmative recommendation of the planning board was unanimous. The town board adopted a resolution to approve the change of zone to NB district to permit the site to be redeveloped as proposed by the applicant. The resolution was adopted December 15, 2015. There was a secret negative declaration, and without going through the various points supporting their determination, the proposal appears to be consistent with the existing development patterns in the vicinity of the subject parcel and compatible with neighboring land uses. This is among other supporting reasons that was set forth by in the secret negative declaration. Now, with regard, sign variances are being requested. Ground sign from 32 square feet to 64 square feet. 32 square feet would be for the logo, and 32 square feet for pricing. Pricing is very critical, as we know. The height being requested is 15 feet, which is the permitted height under the ordinance. The planning staff, I think, is recommending 11 feet, but this is the motor parkway. There is no adverse impact whatsoever if a 15-foot ground sign were permitted at this location. The increase on the wall signs on the building from 1 to 2 signs, Bowler Market over the entry, and at this point, and then there's simply a logo which is part of the facade. It's a stone logo, part of the facade, which I think is very attractive on the building. So they're really not signs that are garish or overwhelming or intrusive by any stretch. The height would be necessary for good vision on the motor parkway, for notification of the brand, the price, and access to the particular site. It's a major road. There is a need for clear access. In general, there is no activity behind the building at all, so there is no adverse effect to the adjoining hotel-motel property. Deliveries other than by fuel tanker or by box truck or straight truck with delivery times that are very brief and generally off-peak hour. Obviously, the tanker truck must offload at the underground fuel storage tanks. The existing easterly curb cut on Motor Parkway is not being relocated and will remain in the same location in which it has existed since the service station was originally erected. The front yard setback variances I indicated are for the canopy and not for a building as such. Canopy setback variances are almost always required inasmuch as canopies are always located over the dispenser islands, which dispenser islands are always closer to the street for vehicle access. The canopy is merely a cover for the convenience and protection of the motor vehicle operator. With regard to impacts, if the variances for the development of the proposed applicant are granted by this board, there will be no discernible impacts. The site has been an operating gasoline filling station since approximately 1964. The site as proposed will have a much better design for ingress, egress, on-site traffic circulation, and certainly much better in appearance, architecturally and landscape-wise. The site will be attractively landscaped. The area within which the subject parcel is located has a predominantly large office complex and industrial zoning pattern. It will be a support use for the 1,400-acre industrial park at a unique location, which no other motor vehicle fueling station with a convenience store can compare to for precedent in the town of Smithtown, and I know that is a concern of the planning staff. It fronts on a major county highway, which runs parallel to the Long Island Expressway, with exit and access ramps in close proximity. Each road carries thousands of cars per day. As proposed, it fits the zoning pattern comprehensive plan. It is compatible use with the existing uses. I think the planning advisory report to the planning board had a very practical and positive understanding of the site and its proposed development at this unique location. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that concludes my presentation, and I do have two witnesses that I would like to submit some brief testimony to the board, if I may.
Certainly.
Mr. Breslin.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Could you state your name, spell your last name, and state your address for the record, please?
Sure. My name is John Breslin. The spelling is Breslin. My business address is 44 Elm Street, Huntington, New York, 11743.
Thank you.
Mr. Breslin, what is your profession?
I'm a licensed real estate appraiser.
Are these a copy of your qualifications?
Yes, it is.
Me? Are these a copy of your qualifications?
Yes, it is.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to submit them to the board for the record.
Fine. Thank you.
Did you make a site and area inspection at my request, Mr. Breslin?
Yes, I have.
Have you formed an opinion on the merits of the application?
Yes, I have.
Would you please tell the board your findings and conclusions?
Yes. In connection with this application, I was requested by the applicant to give an opinion with respect to this requested relief. And in doing that, I was provided with the application materials. I also had the opportunity to review the submissions with respect to the planning staff memorandum and some of the documentation with respect to the rezoning application that took place last year. I, of course, visited the subject site and the neighborhood that it was in. Mr. DiNicola indicated that he would describe it briefly and leave it to me, but I think he went a little overboard and described it in great detail, so I don't think I have to go into great detail with respect to what's there. The board, I'm sure, is really fully cognizant of what's around that. But just briefly, the subject property is somewhat unique in that it's situated at the very end of the town, the southerly border, and Motor Parkway is the dividing line right next to the subject property on its southerly boundary. And it's especially important when you're looking at what you're looking to decide here today with respect to, I think what's the primary issue before you is the size of the convenience store. Most of the other reliefs that are before you you're constrained with respect to the size of the property. The primary issue in looking through the recommendations by the planning staff, those that have been withdrawn or modified because of the change in the resubmissions, have eliminated a lot of the variances. The primary one is the size of the convenience store. And the location of the property and its unique nature is I think, especially relevant when you look at where it is and what's around it. And what I mean by that is that the property and those who drive along Motor Parkway in this particular area don't necessarily know they're driving. If they're driving in an easterly direction, they look to the left, they're in Smithtown. They look to the right, they're in Islip. They just know they're driving down Motor Parkway. On the right side, they see gas stations and convenience stores. On the left side, they don't. At the present time, they don't see any. They just see the large office building of Tritech. They see the Scene nightclub. They see the large Hot Bug Industrial Park. If this is approved and is developed as contemplated, there will be one gas station and convenience store in the Smithtown side. But if the convenience store is 1,000 or 1,200 square feet, it will be vastly different than those that are on the south side of Motor Parkway. There are two gas stations existing now and a third one that's under construction. There is the 7-Eleven, which is just diagonally across the street. That's a 2,700 square foot convenience store on it with a gas station. A little bit further to east of that, there's a Shell, which has a convenience store that's about 1,500 square feet, plus a separate car wash building as well as the gas station. And then if you move a little further east, there's the Quick Check, which is under construction, and that is 6,700 square feet of convenience store. So the subject is, as proposed at this size, is clearly not out of character with what's existing along the subject block. And I think that's a very, very important consideration when you're looking at the standards under 267, both as it relates to the neighborhood pattern and as to the whether or not the variance is substantial. When you're looking at the mathematical number, 1,000 to 1,900, clearly mathematically it's substantial. But when you look at it in the context of what the neighborhood is developed with in this immediate vicinity, clearly it's not. In fact, if you look at quick checks at 6,700 versus what's proposed here at 1,900, there's a substantial difference. It's much more in line with what's contemplated across the street. So I think by granting the relief to allow that convenience store as proposed, it's certainly not going to be out of character with the development pattern along this immediate block. Your concern with respect to, and it's outlined in planning's memo, is the concern of setting a precedent for other parts of the town. But I think you clearly have the ability to distinguish this location, especially around the Hauppauge Industrial Park, at the very southernmost part of the town, on a block that clearly separates the town as opposed to other locations within the town. So I think you have the ability to distinguish this location. And that, I think, was recognized in the Planning Advisory report as being a very unusual location and the ability to distinguish that. When you look at the rest of the standards under 267, there is no other way to add additional land to this property. There's a hotel developed on one side of it, the C nightclub on the other. The property dimensions are what they are. With respect to the variances, with respect to the signs, Mr. DiNicola, I think, aptly explained why those are necessary, and that the size of the sign with the gas stations, in particular with respect to pricing, requires them to be larger than necessary. And the second sign on the building is essentially de minimis with respect to that. Under the general standards in your code, this is not going to change or alter the pattern of development. It's not going to have any adverse impact on the surrounding community. In fact, in this case, this has been a derelict property for over 10 years, and the ability to have this redeveloped into a first-class operation as contemplated, it can only be beneficial to the immediately surrounding business community. Mr. DiNicola had explained that there are no residences in close proximity to this subject property, so it's only the business community that will benefit from this redevelopment of this site, and that's clearly going to be a positive both for the immediate businesses as well as for the passerby along Moreland as well as Motor Parkway. So overall, I believe that I would hope that you would look favorably on this application. I think it's potentially a very significant benefit for this industrial commercial corridor along Motor Parkway. I have a series of photographs that I took that show the depiction of the subject neighborhood, outlining what was explained by Mr. DiNicola and myself, depicting the location of the subject, if any of you are not familiar with it, as well as I have photos of the 7-Eleven convenience store, the Shell gas station, and the Quick Check under construction. There are 20 in total. They're all labeled. I'd like to hand those up.
Fine. Thank you.
Be happy to answer any questions if there are any from the board.
You want to do the rest of the presentation? Does anyone have any questions on this? No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Frank Feliciano, please. Will submit traffic testimony.
All right. Again, state your name, spell your last name, and give your address for the record, please.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Frank A. Felicciotto, F as in Frank, I-L-I-C-I-O-T-T-O. Firm Stonefield Engineering and Design, offices at 2702 41st Avenue in Long Island City.
Thank you.
What is your profession, Mr. Feliciano?
I am a licensed professional engineer in the state of New York. I have over 13 years of experience in the field of traffic and transportation engineering. I'm also licensed in 7 other states in the U.S., and I've appeared before the town of Smithtown, town board, and planning board on a couple of occasions in the past.
Are these your written qualifications?
They are.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to submit them for the record.
Thank you.
Mr. Feliciano, have you made a site inspection on my request?
Yes, I have.
And did you prepare a written report with regard to traffic at this location?
Yes, I did.
And would you briefly present to the board your findings with regard to the traffic at this location, on-site and off-site, and in conjunction with the road system?
Absolutely, Mr. DiNicola.
At this time, Mr. Chairman, I would like to submit the report to the board, please.
Correct. And the report that's being submitted is a traffic impact study dated July 18th of this year.
Thank you.
So thanks again for the opportunity. Again, I think Mr. DiNicola and Mr. Breslin did a fine job talking about the surrounding roadway network, and I was going to delve into that as well, but I think to save the board, I think the board is very well aware of where we're located. But I will state, I think it's important to state that the unique location where this site is situated has a lot of bearing on the traffic flows in the area. And the Hauppauge Industrial Park, which is located immediately to our north and to our west, plays a large role in that, as does the Long Island Expressway and Motor Parkway. These are major roadways with existing traffic throughout the peak hours. And when you're talking about a gasoline station and convenience store type use, such as what is proposed, that's the type of use that really relies upon the traffic that is already on the roadways today. An existing use, such as a destination-based use like a place of business or a school, is drawing new traffic, whereas a use like this is really reliant on traffic that's already on the road. Uses like this seek out busy roadways for that very reason, and that's why you often see gasoline stations, convenience-type uses along roadways with existing traffic, and that's really no different than what we're considering here. In terms of that sort of dynamic that goes on with these types of uses, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, which Mr. DiNicola introduced earlier, actually provides some insight into what portion of traffic is considered pass-by, as we call it in the field of traffic engineering. Pass-by traffic is traffic that's already on the roadway. So, like Mr. Breslin said, if you're traveling along Motor Parkway today, you might just be passing this site because it's not active. Say it were activated tomorrow, that person who's along their path of travel might decide to turn in, utilize the facilities, and then turn out and head back in the same direction that they were originally headed had the site not been activated. That's a pass-by trip. That's not new traffic being added to the site, to the roadways. There is an element of new traffic, but it's in the minority. The ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, projects approximately 60% of the site's traffic is already on the roadway today. It's just not being drawn into the site because it's derelict. When we look at that, and that's important in sort of forecasting traffic impact, because when you look at a roadway, Motor Parkway, which has, if you're west of the Wicks Road intersection, approximately 12,000 vehicles per day. If you're east of the Wicks Road intersection, you're upwards of about 20,000 vehicles per day. And Wicks Road itself has approximately 18,000 vehicles per day. So there's a lot of traffic already on this roadway. And that's very important from a traffic impact standpoint, because only 60% of the traffic, or 40% rather, it would be considered new to the area. Now, in terms of the traffic flows in the area, we did detailed traffic counts during the weekday morning and evening peak periods. That's generally speaking from 7 in the morning to 9 in the morning, 4 p.m. in the evening to 7 p.m. in the evening. That uses such as these really dovetail on the commuter peak hours, because people mostly go to these stores and fuel their cars when it's convenient to do so, and that's oftentimes in connection with a primary trip, such as school or work or home. We looked at the traffic counts at the intersection. We saw an interesting but not really surprising dynamic going on. In the morning, traffic heading north on Moreland is very heavy because it's basically traffic that's headed to the park, the industrial park, as work is beginning. In the evening, that trend is almost exactly reversed. Southbound traffic is essentially the same quantity as northbound traffic in the morning. In terms of traffic on Motor Parkway, along our site frontage, traffic in the eastbound direction is actually very light in the morning, and that kind of makes sense because you're drawn usually on Long Island towards the west in the morning and east in the evening. That's sort of everyone sort of knows that. You're sort of drawn to the west where businesses are located, the city is, and then that is reversed. So really, this site is really a westbound draw. As you're coming west on Motor Parkway, it's easy to make a right turn in and a right turn out onto Motor Parkway to, let's say, head up to the Saginaw Coast Parkway or the Northern State Parkway, wherever you're headed westbound. So again, that pass-by element plays into the location of this site, both on Motor Parkway and on Moreland, as people are coming to work or leaving to work. All that boils down is essentially what the percentage of new traffic being added to this intersection as a result of this development. We project it to be about 1% of the volumes that are already at this intersection today. In the morning, there's about 2,700 vehicles at this intersection, whether it's a right turn, a left turn, a through movement. In the evening, it's about 3,100 vehicles. And the amount of new traffic, new cars that would be generated by this proposed gasoline station and convenience store is approximately 30 during those peak periods. So again, that's your order of magnitude, 30 compared to 3,000, about 1% during those peak hours. So based on our analysis, and the traffic study goes into it, an insignificant impact based on the analysis procedures and methodologies that we used. I just want to talk about parking, because I know obviously we're seeking a variance from this board. The site requires 19 parking spaces. We're proposing 12 with one land bank to make 13. So we're seeking a variance of 6 spaces. What I will point out is, and Mr. DiNicola hinted on it, the Institute of Transportation Engineers Parking Generation Manual is an industry standard manual that provides guidance on what a site expects to generate in terms of parking. For this land use, which is classified by the ITE as land use 945, the projected parking generation is about 3/4 of a car, and I know that's kind of an odd thing to hear, what's 3/4 of a car, but on average, 0.75 parked vehicles for every fueling position. We're proposing 12 vehicle fueling positions here, so approximately 8 vehicles would be the expected demand. What I will point out is that with the 12 that we have proposed as sort of striped parking spaces, we also have the 12 vehicle fueling positions themselves, which again, not by code allowed to credit that, but in reality, if 30 or 35% of your business is drawn by customers using both gas and convenience, and that does happen, that person is probably not moving their car after they fuel into a striped parking space. They're probably leaving it there in the vehicle fueling area because the time spent in the store is so minimal. It's probably on the order of 2 to 3 minutes, depending on what they're buying. Again, it's convenience items like coffee and newspapers and bottled water, things of that nature. So again, I do feel based on the ITE manual and what we're providing on the site plan that's before you, there would be adequate parking. In addition, geometrically, the site works from a geometric standpoint. If you look at the space between the pump islands themselves, there's 29 feet between the fueling positions. And if you're familiar with the postage stamp size gas stations, let's say in Nassau County, where 2 vehicles are fueling side by side, it's very difficult to pull through, let's say if you finish fueling before. 29 feet will allow you to actually pass through. The width of a car in all reality is about 7 or 8 feet at the most. So 29 feet is more than enough to have a car pass through while 2 vehicles are simultaneously fueling. There is a loading zone provided, so in terms of store deliveries, that area is cordoned off to allow for that activity to occur. Mr. DiNicola mentioned the truck circulation. There is an area for that to happen as well. And then just finally, in terms of the curb cuts, we are asking for relief for the driveway on Motor Parkway. I will note that driveway is proposed to remain where it is now. That offset, per the code, the way the code is written, right now is at just shy of 55 feet, whereas 75 feet is required. I will note that there are some reasons why that curb cut is being left where it is. The driveway that we have cross-access to utilize, which is the existing driveway for the Scene restaurant to our immediate west, is essentially situated on that property line. There's very little offset between their easterly property line and where their driveway begins. So moving this subject site's driveway any farther to the west would put it in very close proximity to the existing driveway for the scene. There is also a very large mature tree immediately to the west of the driveway as it exists today that would probably either need to be cut down or removed, or if we were to place it on the other side of that driveway, it would be essentially on top of the driveway for the scene. So while it's certainly, deficient in terms of the code requirement, it does allow for some spacing with respect to the intersection and then our driveway and then the driveway for the scene. And I will note of all the movements at that intersection, which is signalized, the intersection of Motor Parkway and Moreland, that right turn coming south on Moreland to head west on Motor Parkway is actually one of the least utilized movements at this intersection by virtue of the geometry of the roadway network. So again, minimal conflict is anticipated as a result of leaving that driveway where it is. That concludes my direct testimony. Happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding traffic or circulation.
Any questions? Tony? No,
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Feliciotto. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, just a couple concluding remarks, and then we will be completed, and I thank you for your time and patience. The construction, the redevelopment of this site will permit approximately 30 to 40 construction jobs during construction, approximately 6 to 8 permanent jobs after construction. It obviously will increase the real estate taxability to the town, new service station facility. Sales tax will be substantial in relation to what is there. So the redevelopment of the site financially for the town, for the county, and for employment will be a positive. I respectfully request that the board grant the special exception, the variances to the special exception, and the area variances being requested this evening. And again, I thank you very much for your time and consideration.
All right, thank you. Does anyone on the board have any questions? No. David?
May I say something, please? As you know, we submitted a planning advisory report to the board, and based on the presentation tonight, I would just like to take the opportunity to modify it. For the record, as you know, DEW will be reading the minutes or watching the video. There are two of the requests where the staff recommends to deny without prejudice that haven't been addressed. And they really need to be approved, and I'll explain why they can't be denied without prejudice and why they should be approved instead of denied. One is to reduce the parking setback from 6 feet to 0 feet. The parking for 5 decades, has always been considered not necessarily only the stalls themselves, but the parking lot. And the parking lot includes the truck loading space and the pump island area. And on the west property line, there's a 0-foot setback. The reason that so that's the reason that variance is needed. The reason that we're recommending approval, Mr. DiNicola explained to me that the delivery trucks need the maneuvering space, and the adjacent property to the west has multiple easements, and to put in the 6-foot buffer that's normally required at that place would interfere with both of the things that I mentioned. The second variance that we recommended that be denied without prejudice that really needs to be acted on is the one that requires an adequate buffer yard. That's perhaps it's a subjective or a vague requirement, but over the years, the staff and the board have utilized specific requirements to define what adequate means. The specific requirements that we used are typically found by looking at other parts of the zoning ordinance where there are detailed requirements of buffers. In this situation, the buffer is 6 feet. So since they're not providing the 6 feet on much of the west property line, we would recommend approval of that standard. The other part of the planning advisory report that I would just like to add to is the filling stations located at a gateway of the Hop Hog Industrial Park. As you know, that's very important to the economy and the tax base of the town. The Hop Hog Industrial Park is successful in part due to its image. There are other reasons, of course, but partly its image. And this site is in a critical location. Now, in the past, Bola Corporation has sort of been the Rolls-Royce of filling stations. The one that they're building on 111, or built on 111 and 347, turned out very well. The one they took over on Jericho Turnpike in Comac, while they want to rebuild it and build a different one, what they've taken over and improved, they've improved very well. And the reason I say that is you can't rely that just because Bola is making the application today, they could be bought out or sell the property tomorrow. So I would recommend some form of a condition that requires whoever has the property to build it in accordance with the presentation given here tonight.
Right.
And related to that is they're requesting sign variances to go from 1 to 2. If you notice, what they're requesting are very small signs. And I would recommend that the board say that the approval is good for those signs in particular, and not necessarily larger ones.
All right, fine.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right. I don't think there's anyone in the audience that wants to speak on this, so can I have a motion to close this case, please?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Have a good evening.
You too now. And that concludes our hearing for tonight.